As the war in the Middle East approaches its fifth week, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says their goals will be achieved very soon.
As the Department of War has consistently outlined, we are on or ahead of schedule in that operation and expect to conclude it at the appropriate time here in a matter of weeks, not months. And the progress is going very well. Obviously, we have some work to do. We have to finish the job, and we are finishing that job.
Rubio spoke to reporters after a meeting of G7 foreign ministers outside Paris, stressing that after the U.S. is done in Iran, the challenge will be for allies to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Rubio warned that Iran could set up an illegal toll for access to the strait. In the meantime, it's still shut down, and 1/5 of the world's oil supply can't get through. Footage here shows emergency services operating after a strike on a residential building in southern Tehran. The U.S. and Israel bombed several nuclear facilities and steel facilities today, and Iran continued to launch strikes across the Persian Gulf. For more on this, I'm joined by Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and a former Middle East negotiator. Nice to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of what you just heard there from Marco Rubio saying the U.S. is ahead of schedule? He says the war is going well. Is that how you see it?
Well, ahead of schedule to do what? The reality is that once the Iranians, and by the way, the straits are not closed, the Iranians permit a number of what they consider to be quote unquote non-hostile entities, tankers to get through. Chinese oil, Indian oil. But I think the objectives won't be accomplished at a minimum until the straits are opened. And there are only two ways to do that: to negotiate it or to escalate on the military side in an effort to basically cause the Iranians sufficient pain that they will change their calculation, which is that they think they're winning. They may or may not be delusional, and force the opening. Frankly, every military guy I talk to, and woman, doesn't see this as a practical alternative, particularly with only a low thousands of combat forces. It's a 400-mile coastline. You'd have to suppress and repress Iranian drones, ballistic missiles, and probably land U.S. forces along that littoral. And you're talking that's 2 million Iranians along that coastline. So I think the Trump administration is stuck, frankly, and I think they've done an enormous amount of damage to Iran's ballistic missile inventory, their capacity to produce and store drones, command and control, conventional military. But you now have an international crisis. Unless the straits are open on terms that the international community can accept, and the Iranians, by the way, are already charging tolls. That may well be a price that needs to be paid if, in fact, you end up with a negotiation to end the war. But right now, JP, I see no end in sight. And they keep talking about weeks. It could easily go well beyond that.
You mentioned troops. The Secretary of State said today that they are sticking to their guns on this. They don't want to have to deploy any personnel into Iran. There's clearly no desire to have boots on the ground. Do you think that that's a viable path? Like, can they really bring this conflict to a close successfully without actually deploying any personnel?
Well, I don't think they can do it with 10,000 forces. I think they're going to need a lot more than that. If the plan is somehow to force the opening of the straits and to ensure that the Iranians cannot deter tankers and escort vessels by eliminating their capacity to use their short and long-range ballistic missiles and their drones and their fast boats, that requires a lot of deployment along a long coastline. And I mean, could it come to that? It might, but not with up to 10,000 forces. You're going to need a lot more than that.
What do you make of Trump's public posturing, claiming that the talks are on with Iran, even though Iran is kind of denying that there's really anything going on between the two of them? He says Iran is afraid to admit talks are underway because they figure they'll get killed by their own people. Do you think that this is all bluster? Are there really talks underway to bring this conflict to a close? I know it's kind of opaque, but do you suspect that there is some dialogue?
I think their message is being passed, phone calls being made. Maybe the Turks, the Pakistanis are functioning as intermediaries. But given the Trump administration's record of negotiating, deploying the president's best friend and his son-in-law, Russia-Ukraine failed negotiation. Israelis and Palestinians, implementation of phase one, but Gaza is a mess. It's dysfunctional, it's divided, it's sporadically violent. And now you have Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner ending up without much success in the negotiations in Oman and Geneva. Look, you can't do this stuff on the back of a cocktail napkin. You can't do it on a cell phone. You really do need to get serious about this. And you're going to have to do it directly with the Iranians. That poses a problem on the Iranian side because I think there is a command and control problem. The last report I saw was that Moshtaba Khamenei, the son of Ali Khamenei, who was killed on February 28th, he hasn't approved, assuming he's not incapacitated or in a Russian hospital recovering from wounds. And apparently, Pete Hegseth said that he was seriously wounded and had to add the word disfigured. Why, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that you have a sort of authority, a legitimate authority, that could sanction the kind of negotiations that are required, let alone the concessions that need to be made if these negotiations are going to reach an agreement. So color me skeptical on this. We're going to be at this for weeks and weeks to come.
How would you assess the public's support for the war? Because obviously Trump has claimed that the Strait of Hormuz doesn't really have much of an impact on Americans because they don't get much oil from there. But we know we've seen gas prices go up quite a bit where you are stateside, going over $4 a gallon in some places across the country. Do you think that public opinion weighs on Trump at all as he considers how to prosecute this war?
Yeah, in California, it's $5 a gallon. Look, yeah, sure. But the presidency, unlike the Supreme Court and the U.S. Congress, which goes in and out of session, the presidency, even in normal times, is a 24/7 operation. The Constitution gives the president enormous leeway to conduct foreign policy. So unless you see severe public protests, pressure on representatives to somehow end the war, I think the president has weeks more at his own discretion to decide what he wants to do. Does he want to escalate? Or is he thinking about the possibility of declaring victory, assuming the Iranians, if the president decided to stand down, would let him out of this war? It's by no means certain. They want to impose severe costs for what the U.S. and the Israelis have done. So Marco Rubio may say 2 weeks. The president said 4 to 6 weeks. What, it's now March 27th?
Yeah.
I guess that's right. I mean, I'd be stunned if you and I aren't having this same conversation a month from now.
Yeah, there were reports today that the president is bored with the war. I don't know if you saw those headlines, and he wants to move on from this. I mean, what does that tell you?
It tells me that Donald Trump is interested in, let me put it this way. Donald Trump has conflated his own personal prejudices, his instincts, his boredom or not boredom with the national interest. And I think that's a very dangerous conflation. He's not a normal president. And we do not have a normal decision-making process. The Secretary of State, I worked for a half dozen, should be managing this process, not the president's best friend and son-in-law. And there should be serious efforts to create either a military pathway out of this, and CENTCOM and U.S. military are extraordinarily competent. They'll do what they're told. I worry a lot about the political judgment of the people who are in charge.
Well, let's leave it there. Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Nice to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
And thanks for having me, JP.